Have you ever known someone who seemed perfectly fine one moment, laughing, chatting, living their life as usual, only to be gone the next? The suddenness of it hits like a thunderclap, leaving loved ones reeling in a storm of grief and disbelief. It's the kind of loss that feels unreal, a cruel twist of fate that no one saw coming. But what if I told you that in many cases, the warning signs were there all along, whispering quietly beneath the surface? Too often, those subtle cries for help are brushed aside, mistaken for the inevitable creaks and groans of aging. Yet sudden death, especially in older adults, doesn't always strike without notice. The body, in its wisdom, tries to sound the alarm, sometimes faintly, sometimes urgently, begging us to listen before it's too late. Or that's why I'm here today, sharing a story that could change everything for you or someone you love. We're diving into 6 critical warning signs, red flags that could signal a life-threatening condition lurking just out of sight. These aren't loud, dramatic symptoms you'd see in a Hollywood movie. They're the quiet, insidious ones, easy to dismiss as nothing serious. But make no mistake, they can point to dangers like heart failure, strokes, or fatal blood clots, conditions that can escalate in the blink of an eye. Recognizing these signs early and acting on them could mean the difference between a second chance at life and a heartbreaking goodbye. So settle in, stay with me until the end, and let's uncover these hidden signals together. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd urge you to hit that button and ring the bell, because the knowledge you'll gain here might just save a life. Number 1. Unexplained shortness of breath. Picture this. It's a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air smells of fallen leaves and possibility. You're climbing the familiar stairs to your front porch, a routine you've mastered over years of coming and going. But today, something's off. Halfway up, your breath catches, like a bird trapped in a cage too small. Your chest tightens, a faint ache blooming beneath your ribs, and you pause, one hand gripping the railing, as the world tilts ever so slightly. You shake it off, muttering to yourself that you're just out of shape, or maybe it's the chill in the air. After a moment, the feeling fades, and you carry on, the incident filed away as a quirk of getting older. But what if that fleeting struggle was more than a passing inconvenience? What if it was your body's desperate plea for help? Unexplained shortness of breath isn't just a sign of fatigue or a sedentary lifestyle. It's a potential harbinger of something far graver. When your heart falters, unable to pump blood with the strength it once had, fluid can seep into your lungs, turning every inhale into a battle. This is the silent march of congestive heart failure, a condition that can creep up gradually or strike with sudden ferocity. Or perhaps it's a pulmonary embolism, a deadly blood clot that's broken free and lodged in your lungs, cutting off oxygen like a dam choking a river. These aren't rare, far-off possibilities. They can strike anyone, anywhere, often without fanfare. And too many people, busy with life, stubborn in their optimism, miss the clues until the curtain falls. Let me tell you about Robert, a man who embodied the quiet resilience of a bygone era. At 74, he was a retired schoolteacher with a shock of silver hair and a laugh that could fill a room. His days were spent tending his garden or strolling the tree-lined streets of his small town, waving to neighbors who'd known him for decades. But one morning, as he ambled past the old oak by the corner store, a strange heaviness settled over him. His breath grew shallow, each step feeling like wading through molasses. He stopped, leaning against the gnarled trunk, beads of sweat dotting his forehead despite the cool breeze. His wife, Clara, noticed his pallor when he shuffled back home, her brow furrowing with worry. "You should see Dr. Ellis," she urged, her voice soft but firm. Robert waved her off with a chuckle, his pride as sturdy as ever. "Just getting old, love," he said, patting her hand. "Nothing a cup of tea won't fix." A week later, Clara found him crumpled on the kitchen floor, his favorite mug shattered beside him. The paramedics arrived too late. A massive heart attack had stolen him away. In the days that followed, Clara replayed that morning by the oak tree over and over, tears tracing the lines of her weathered face. The doctors confirmed what she'd feared. That shortness of breath had been his heart's cry for help, a warning drowned out by denial. If only he'd listened, they said. If only he'd sought help, treatment might have turned back the clock. Here's what you need to know. If you find yourself winded after mild effort, like a short walk or climbing a few steps, and it's new, don't dismiss it. Watch for breathlessness that strikes when you're lying flat, forcing you to prop up pillows to sleep, or jolts you awake at night, gasping as though you've surfaced from deep water. These aren't quirks of age. They're distress signals from your heart or lungs, pleading for attention. A doctor can run tests, an echocardiogram, a chest X-ray, to peek beneath the surface and catch trouble before it festers. Robert's story isn't unique, but it doesn't have to be yours. If your breathing shifts without reason, if it feels like your lungs can't keep up, act. It's not about fear, it's about giving yourself the chance to keep going, to see another sunrise, to share another laugh with the ones who matter most. Number 2, frequent chest discomfort, not just pain. Imagine this. It's a quiet evening, the kind where the world slows down and the golden glow of a lamp bathes your living room in warmth. You're settled into your favorite armchair, a cup of chamomile tea steaming on the table beside you, the day's worries melting away as you flip through a worn novel. Then, out of nowhere, a strange sensation creeps in, a tightness in your chest, like an invisible hand pressing down, gentle but insistent. It's not the searing pain you'd expect from the movies, no clutching at your heart or collapsing in agony, just an odd, uncomfortable pressure, a whisper of something amiss. You shift in your seat, take a slow sip of tea, and after a few minutes, it ebbs away. That was strange, you think, shrugging it off as indigestion or a muscle twinge. But what if that fleeting discomfort was your body's way of waving a red flag, a quiet SOS before a storm? Most of us picture a heart attack as a dramatic, unmistakable event, crushing pain radiating down the arm, a collapse worthy of a medical drama. But the truth is sneakier, more insidious. Frequent chest discomfort, whether it's a dull ache, a mild burning, or that nagging squeeze, can be the heart's early warning system, sounding off days or even weeks before a catastrophic event. It might come and go, teasing you into complacency because it's not bad enough to warrant alarm. Yet beneath the surface, arteries could be narrowing, blood flow stuttering, the heart muscle crying out for oxygen. This isn't just a theory, it's a reality too many ignore until the chance for action slips away. Take Harold, a 78-year-old widower with a twinkle in his eye and a knack for fixing anything with a motor. He'd spent his life tinkering in his garage, the smell of oil and sawdust as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Lately, though, he'd notice it's something odd. Every so often, when he hauled a bag of groceries from the car or climbed the creaky stairs to his bedroom, a faint squeeze gripped his chest. It wasn't sharp, nothing to write home about, just a sensation he described to his poker buddies as a little hug from the inside. They'd laugh, and he'd join in, figuring it was the price of a life well lived. His daughter, Ellen, wasn't so sure. She'd catch him pausing mid-task, his hand resting on his sternum, and her gut twisted with unease. "Dad, maybe get that checked?" she'd prod, her voice laced with concern. "Nah," he'd reply, flashing that lopsided grin. "I'm tougher than a $2 steak." One chilly night, as Harold brushed his teeth before bed, that familiar tightness returned. He leaned against the sink, waiting for it to pass like always. But this time, it didn't. The pressure grew, a heavy weight pinning him in place, and then the world went dark. Ellen found him sprawled on the bathroom floor the next morning, his toothbrush still clutched in his hand. The coroner's report was stark. A heart attack, preceded by weeks of subtle warnings Harold had dismissed. Ellen couldn't stop the what-ifs from circling her mind. What if he'd listened? What if that little hug had sent him to a doctor instead of a punchline? Here's the takeaway. Chest discomfort doesn't have to be unbearable to be dangerous. If you feel an unexplained pressure, squeezing, or heaviness, especially during activity or stress, don't brush it aside. Some liken it to indigestion, others to a weight sitting on their ribs. But whatever it feels like, it's your heart murmuring for help. Pay attention if it lingers or recurs, if it's new or different from what you're used to. A simple visit to a doctor, an EKG, a stress test, could uncover blockages or weaknesses before they turn deadly. Harold's stubbornness was part of his charm, but it cost him years he could have spent teaching his grandkids to fix a carburetor or sharing stories over a cold beer. Don't let pride or doubt silence your body's voice. If your chest is talking, listen. It might just be telling you how to stay alive. If this is resonating with you, drop number 2 in the comments below. I'd love to know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider hitting that button and ringing the bell. Your support keeps this journey going, and together we can keep shining a light on what matters. Number 3, sudden weakness or dizziness. Imagine this. It's a bright Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through your kitchen window as the aroma of fresh coffee fills the air. You're humming an old tune, flipping pancakes for the grandkids who'll tumble through the door any minute. Life feels steady, predictable, until, without warning, a wave of dizziness crashes over you. The room tilts like a ship caught in a storm, and you grip the counter, your knuckles whitening as you fight to stay upright. Maybe your arm feels heavy, or your legs wobble beneath you, but it's fleeting, just a handful of seconds before the world rights itself. You blink, shake your head, and mutter, "Must have stood up too fast." The pancakes sizzle on, and you push the moment aside, chalking it up to a skipped breakfast or a restless night. But what if that brief unsteadiness was more than a fluke? What if it was your body flashing a neon sign, pleading for you to notice? Sudden weakness or dizziness isn't always a benign blip. Sometimes it's a chilling preview of something far more sinister. One of the sneakiest culprits is a transient ischemic attack, or TIA, a mini-stroke that briefly starves part of your brain of blood. It's like a dress rehearsal for a full-blown stroke, complete with dizziness, weakness in an arm or leg, or a spinning sensation, only to vanish as quickly as it came. Too many shrug it off because it doesn't linger. But a TIA isn't a false alarm. It's a countdown. Left unchecked, it could be the opening act to a stroke that steals your speech, your movement, your independence. Or maybe it's your heart, beating out of rhythm in a chaotic dance called atrial fibrillation, dropping your blood pressure just enough to make you sway. Either way, these aren't quirks to ignore. They're your body's urgent Morse code. Let me introduce you to George, a 72-year-old former firefighter with a barreled chest and a voice that could command a room. He'd spent his career hauling hoses and scaling ladders, a man forged in heat and grit. Retirement suited him. He'd traded sirens for fishing rods, spending lazy afternoons by the lake with his daughter Lily. But one humid afternoon, as he stood in his kitchen slicing tomatoes for a sandwich, the world lurched. His vision blurred, a kaleidoscope of colors swirling at the edges, and his left leg buckled like a marionette with a cut string. He caught himself on the counter, the knife clattering to the floor, and sat hard on a stool. A minute later, it was over. His sight cleared, his strength returned. "Just a head rush," he grumbled, though a flicker of unease gnawed at him. That evening, over dinner, he mentioned it to Lily, who frowned, her fork pausing mid-air. "Dad, that doesn't sound right. Let's call the doctor." George scoffed, his pride a shield. "I'm fine, kiddo. Tougher than that." The next morning, Lily's scream shattered the quiet. She'd found him sprawled on the living room rug, his right arm limp, his words a garbled mess. The stroke that hit him overnight left him half paralyzed, his booming voice reduced to a whisper. In the sterile hospital room, the doctor's words stung. That dizzy spell had been a TIA, a warning George had waved away. Lily sat by his bedside, her hand trembling as she held his, replaying their dinner conversation. If only she'd pushed harder, if only he'd listened. Maybe he'd still be casting lines into the lake instead of relearning how to hold a spoon. Here's what to watch for. If dizziness strikes out of the blue, if your legs or arms suddenly feel weak, like they've forgotten their purpose, or if the room spins even for a moment, don't dismiss it. Especially if it's paired with slurred speech, a drooping face, or blurred vision. It's a call to action. Time is everything with a stroke. Every minute you wait, more brain cells fade. Even if it passes quickly, a doctor can scan for blockages or irregular rhythms, prescribing meds or tweaks to stop the next hit. George's toughness was his badge of honor, but it couldn't outrun biology. Don't let a fleeting wobble become your regret. If your body stumbles without reason, heed it. It's begging you to fight for tomorrow. Drop number 3 in the comments if this hits home. I'd love to hear you're with me. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that button and ring the bell. We're in this together, uncovering truths that could keep us standing strong. Number 4, swelling in the legs or abdomen. Pecture. It's the end of a long day, the kind where the hours stretch like taffy, and all you want is to sink into the couch with a sigh. You kick off your shoes, peel off your socks, and there they are, deep, crescent-shaped dents circling your ankles, as if the fabrics left a permanent tattoo. Your legs look puffy, unfamiliar, like they belong to someone else. Or maybe it's your belly, straining against your waistband, despite no extra helpings at dinner. You press a finger into your shin, and the indent lingers, a ghostly imprint that doesn't snap back. Too much salt, you mutter, or I've been on my feet too long. You prop your legs up, promising they'll be fine by morning. But what if that swelling isn't just a passing nuisance? What if it's your body hoisting a distress flag, signaling a storm brewing within? Swelling in the legs, feet, or abdomen, known as edema, can seem harmless, a minor annoyance tied to diet or fatigue. But when it appears suddenly or worsens without reason, it's often a billboard for trouble. If your heart's pump weakens, blood pools in your lower extremities, gravity tugging fluid downward until your tissues balloon. This is a hallmark of heart failure, a slow betrayal where the organ that's kept you alive can't keep up anymore. Or perhaps it's your kidneys faltering, unable to filter waste, or your liver scarring, letting fluid seep into your belly in a condition called ascites. These aren't distant threats, they're silent saboteurs, and swelling is their calling card. Ignore it, and the pressure builds toward a breaking point. Meet Frank, a 76-year-old Navy veteran with a gravelly laugh and a chest full of medals he'd never brag about. He'd weathered storms at sea and raised 3 kids, his hands calloused from a life of hard work. Lately, though, his body felt off. His ankles, once lean from years of marching, puffed up over weeks, his socks leaving angry red welts. His jeans fit tighter around his waist too, his stomach bloated despite his usual Spartan meals. Getting soft in my old age, he'd joke to his wife Marie, who'd eye him with quiet worry. She'd noticed his energy waning. He'd doze off mid-story, his breath a little shallower each night. "Frank, let's see the doc," she'd coax, her voice a soft anchor. He'd grunt, stubborn as the tides. "It's nothing, Marie, just need to cut the salt." One dawn, Frank jolted awake, his lungs clawing for air, his swollen legs leaden beneath the sheets. Marie dialed 911 as he wheezed, her hands steady despite the panic in her eyes. At the ER, the verdict landed like a depth charge: severe heart failure. Fluid had flooded his system, his heart too weak to push it through. The swelling, the fatigue, they'd been clues, a breadcrumb trail he'd swept aside. As he lay in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from his arms, Marie squeezed his hand, her voice trembling. "We could have caught this, Frank." The doctor nodded. Early treatment might have spared him this brink. Now, they faced a steeper fight, one that could have been gentler, with a little less pride. Here's how to spot the danger. If your legs or feet swell without a clear cause, if shoes pinch or socks bite, or if your abdomen bloats like a drum, take note. Press your skin. If the dent holds for seconds, it's not just water weight. Pair it with shortness of breath or sudden weight gain, and it's a siren you can't mute. A doctor can probe, ultrasounds, blood tests to find the root. Heart, kidney, or liver. Frank's swelling wasn't vanity's price. It was his body's SOS. Don't wait until it screams. If fluid's pooling where it shouldn't, act. It's your chance to steer the ship back to shore. Drop number 4 in the comments if this stirs you. I'd love to know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that button and ring the bell. We're unearthing lifelines together, one story at a time. Number 5. Unusual fatigue that appears suddenly. Imagine this. The alarm clock chirps, pulling you from a solid 8 hours of sleep, the kind that should leave you refreshed and ready to seize the day. You swing your legs over the bed's edge, expecting that familiar spark of energy, but instead, a bone-deep weariness clings to you like damp fog. Your limbs feel leaden, as if you've run a marathon in your dreams, and even the thought of brewing coffee feels like scaling a mountain. You push through. Shower, dress, sip that first bitter sip, but the exhaustion lingers, a shadow that won't lift. Must be getting older, you tell yourself, forcing a smile in the mirror. But deep down, a quiet unease stirs. What if this isn't just a bad morning? What if it's your body whispering a warning you can't afford to miss? Unusual fatigue, sudden, relentless, and unexplained, isn't the everyday tiredness you shake off with a nap or a strong cup. It's a thief, robbing you of stamina for no apparent reason, leaving you winded by tasks that once felt effortless. When your heart struggles to pump blood efficiently, it rations energy, prioritizing vital organs over your daily grind. This can signal a brewing heart attack or cardiovascular collapse, sometimes weeks before the crisis hits. It's not dramatic, no chest-clutching theatrics, just a slow, creeping drain that fools you into thinking it's normal. But normal tiredness fades. This kind festers. A quiet alarm too many snooze through until the final bell tolls. Let me tell you about Ruth, a 70-year-old retired librarian with a wiry frame and a mind sharp as a tack. She was a fixture in her small town, known for her brisk morning walks along the river and her backyard garden, bursting with roses. Ruth thrived on routine, her days a symphony of small joys. But one spring, the music faltered. She'd wake, feeling like she hadn't slept, her usual vigor replaced by a heaviness she couldn't shake. A stroll to the mailbox left her breathless, her pruning shears abandoned mid-snip. Just aging, she'd sigh to her neighbor Peg, who'd frown over the fence. Peg saw the change, Ruth's spark dimming, her naps growing longer. "You sure you're okay?" Peg pressed one afternoon, watching Ruth slump into a patio chair. "Oh, I'm fine," Ruth replied, her smile brittle. "Nothing a little rest won't cure." Weeks later, Ruth woke to a new sensation, a faint pressure in her chest, like a stone lodged beneath her ribs. She barely made it to the phone before collapsing, her call to 911 a raspy plea. At the hospital, the diagnosis landed hard. A heart attack, fueled by a blockage her body had been flagging for weeks. That crushing fatigue, her heart's distress signal, ignored as it begged for oxygen. Peg sat by her bedside, guilt gnawing at her. Had she pushed harder? Would Ruth still be weeding her roses? The doctor was blunt. Early action could have rewritten the ending. Ruth survived, but her garden days were traded for rehab, a price paid for brushing off the whispers. Here's the key. If your energy plummets without cause, if simple acts like dressing or walking the dog drain you dry, don't chalk it up to age. Notice if it's new, persistent, paired with weakness or a need to rest more than usual. This isn't laziness. It's your heart waving a white flag. A checkup, blood work, and EKG can spot trouble before it escalates. Ruth's fatigue wasn't a sign of slowing down. It was a cry to keep going. Don't let it fade into background noise. If exhaustion hits like a brick wall and won't budge, listen. It's your body fighting to stay in the game. Drop number 5 in the comments if this resonates. I'd love to feel your presence. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that button and ring the bell. We're piecing together a map to survival, one weary step at a time. Number 6, irregular or racing heartbeat. Imagine this. It's a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind where time stretches slow and soft. You're sprawled in your recliner, a dog-eared paperback in hand, the hum of a distant lawnmower drifting through the open window. The world feels calm, steady, until your chest betrays it. Out of nowhere, your heart lurches into overdrive, a wild fluttering like a bird trapped against your ribs. Or maybe it skips, stuttering in a rhythm that's all wrong, pounding harder than the stillness warrants. It's fleeting, a handful of beats before it settles, but it leaves you rattled, your breath shallow. Too much coffee, you murmur, or just a fluke. You turn the page, willing your pulse to obey. But what if that erratic thump wasn't random? What if it was your heart's desperate Morse code, tapping out a warning? An irregular or racing heartbeat isn't just a quirk of stress or caffeine. It can be a siren call from a heart in distress. Atrial fibrillation, a common culprit, turns your heart's steady drum into a chaotic stutter, blood pooling in chambers where clots can form. Those clots can break free, racing to your brain or lungs, triggering a stroke or sudden collapse. It's not a rare fluke. It's a ticking clock, raising your risk of catastrophe fivefold if ignored. Sometimes it's subtle, a flutter you barely notice. Other times, it's a gallop that steals your breath. Either way, it's your engine misfiring, and dismissing it is like ignoring a check engine light on a long, lonely road. Meet Tom, a 73-year-old grandfather with a mop of white hair and a grin that could charm anyone. He was the family rock. Weekends meant card games with his buddies, his laughter echoing over the clink of poker chips. One night, mid-bluff, his heart took off. Racing like he'd sprinted a mile, he froze, cards slipping from his fingers, but it passed in seconds. "Whoa, that was weird," he chuckled, brushing it off as the group stared, uneasy. Over weeks, it kept happening. Short bursts of rapid beats, a flutter here, a thud there. His wife, June, caught him rubbing his chest one evening, her eyes narrowing. "Tom, that's not normal. Let's get it checked." He smirked, ever the joker. "What? And miss my winning streak?" "It's nothing." At a routine checkup, Tom mentioned it offhand, expecting a shrug. Instead, the doctor's face tightened, an EKG scribbling out proof: atrial fibrillation. Tests showed his heart was a clot factory, teetering on disaster. "You're lucky," the doctor said, prescribing blood thinners. "A stroke was waiting if you'd delayed." June's relief was palpable, her hand tight on his as they left. Tom's poker nights resumed, but with a new seriousness. He'd dodged a bullet, one he'd almost handed the gun to himself. His heart's wild dance wasn't a gag, it was a plea to keep dealing the cards. Here's what to heed. If your heart flutters, skips, or races without cause, especially if it's frequent or paired with dizziness or breathlessness, don't wait it out. Feel your pulse. If it's erratic, not just fast, that's the clue. A doctor can hook you to a monitor, catch the glitch, and fix it before it's game over. Tom's luck held, but luck isn't a plan. If your heartbeat turns rogue, listen. It's begging you to stay in the hand. Drop number 6 in the comments if this strikes a chord. I'd love to know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed, hit that button and ring the bell. We're dealing out survival, one beat at a time. Final thoughts. So here we are, standing at the crossroads of 6 stories, 6 lives touched by whispers they didn't hear until the volume rose too high. We've walked through unexplained shortness of breath, where Robert's garden grew quiet, frequent chest discomfort, where Harold's garage fell silent, sudden weakness or dizziness, where George's fishing rod gathered dust, swelling in the legs or abdomen, where Frank's medals lost their shine, unusual fatigue, where Ruth's roses waited untended, and an irregular heartbeat, where Tom's poker chips nearly hit the table for the last time. These aren't just tales, they're mirrors, reflecting the subtle signals your body might be sending right now. Unexplained shortness of breath, chest pressure, dizzy spells, swelling, exhaustion, a racing pulse. They're not inconveniences to shrug off. They're your body's SOS, a lifeline thrown before the tide pulls you under. The tragedy isn't just the loss, it's the missed chances. Too many see these signs as aging's toll, not realizing they're flags marking a path to heart failure, strokes, or sudden collapse. But here's the hope. You hold the power to change the ending. If any of these echo in your life or in someone you love, don't wait for the crash. A doctor's visit, a test, a question could rewrite the script, turning a warning into a win. It's not about fear, it's about fight, about claiming the mornings, the laughs, the moments that matter. Sudden death steals enough. Don't let it take what you can save. Now I want to hear from you. Have these signs brushed your life? A flutter you ignored? A fatigue you excused? Or maybe you've watched a loved one dismiss their own clues. Drop a comment below. Share one thing that struck you, one step you'll take. Your voice fuels this journey, lighting up the shadows for us all. If this hit home, give it a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Your support keeps these stories alive, rippling out to inform, inspire, and maybe even rescue. Thanks for walking this path with me. Let's keep going together into the next chapter.